The cold floor gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights as Jordan Blackwood pushed his cleaning cart down the hallway. The hum of the building's air conditioning was the only sound, almost drowned out by the hurried footsteps of high-powered executives on their way to yet another meeting. To them, Jordan was invisible, a shadow in the background. But that morning, things were about to change. He paused near the elevator bank, his eyes scanning the crowded lobby. A group of international clients was gathered near the front desk, speaking in rapid-fire Chinese. The receptionist, struggling to keep up, faltered in her attempt to answer their questions. Jordan's ears pricked up. Without thinking, he stepped forward, offering a few quiet words in Mandarin. The clients paused, their confusion dissipating in an instant. They smiled, relief crossing their faces. Jordan spoke clearly and with confidence, guiding them toward the meeting rooms, smoothly switching between Mandarin and English to assist. What no one else saw was the CEO of ByteGen Technologies, Maximus Green, stepping out of the elevator, his eyes widening as he overheard the brief exchange. He froze, stunned by what he had just heard. Did he just? Maximus muttered under his breath, unable to fully process the unexpected display of talent from the company's janitor. Jordan didn't even realize the CEO had witnessed the exchange. To him, it was just another day, another set of rooms to clean, another set of floors to scrub. But in that instant, his life was about to change forever. Maximus stared at Jordan as the young man entered his office, unsure of how to even begin the conversation. The janitor who had just helped a group of clients with ease in a language most executives couldn't even pronounce, this was not the image of a cleaning crew member he had in mind. Jordan stood in front of him, shifting uncomfortably. Maximus studied him carefully, his sharp business instincts kicking in. The young man before him looked like any other worker, worn uniform, quiet demeanor, a slight frown as if he couldn't quite place why he had been called in. "Mr. Blackwood," Maximus began, his voice measured. "I need to ask you something." Jordan nodded but said nothing. He had no idea where this conversation was going. He was used to being ignored, used to blending into the background. But now, sitting in a plush leather chair across from one of the most powerful men in the city, he was unsure whether to stay silent or speak. "That thing you did, back there with the clients," Maximus continued, leaning forward, his eyes narrowing. "You speak Mandarin. Fluent. You didn't say a word when they were struggling, but you stepped in and fixed it. Just like that. You didn't hesitate." Jordan remained silent. He had no intention of drawing attention to himself, especially for something as trivial as language. It was just a skill. A tool he had honed over the years, a way to survive. "How many languages do you speak?" Maximus asked, leaning forward. It wasn't just Mandarin, was it? Jordan hesitated for a moment. Should he even answer? It was an irrelevant detail to most people. It never mattered in his line of work. But something in Maximus's tone told him this wasn't just idle curiosity. 8, Jordan replied quietly. Mandarin, Spanish, French, German, Italian, Russian, Japanese, and some Arabic. I've learned them over the years, mostly on my own. It helps to keep my mind sharp. Maximus's expression shifted, a flicker of disbelief crossing his face. The janitor, the man who pushed a mop and swept the floors every day, spoke 8 languages fluently. He was a walking polyglot, a hidden genius, and yet here he was, cleaning up after the very people who failed to see him for what he was. And you've been here, how long? Maximus asked, leaning back in his chair, clearly processing the revelation. 3 years, Jordan replied, his voice steady. I clean the floors. I do my job. Maximus shook his head, almost disbelieving. 3 years. And all this time, no one knew. No one cared to ask. Jordan shrugged slightly, his eyes downcast. It's not their job to care, he said simply. Maximus was silent for a moment, processing. He had seen employees come and go in this building, brilliant minds, talented individuals, all with the right resumes and polished appearances. But never had he come across someone like this, someone with so much untapped potential, hidden beneath a uniform. He finally spoke, his voice firm but thoughtful, "We need to talk." Jordan didn't know what to expect. He followed Maximus to his office, unsure of what was about to happen. The air was thick with tension, and he could feel the weight of the CEO's expectations bearing down on him. He had no idea where this was going, but he wasn't sure he could even hope for something more than another polite dismissal. As they entered Maximus's office, Maximus gestured for him to sit. The space was sleek, modern, with large windows overlooking the city. A symbol of power. It was the type of office Jordan had only ever dreamed about. Maximus sat down behind his desk, folding his hands. He studied Jordan for a moment, as if weighing his next words carefully. "Jordan," Maximus began, "I've been in this business for over 15 years. I've seen all types of people, highly educated, highly skilled, high-flying executives with credentials to burn. But not a single one of them has ever walked into this building and casually spoken 8 different languages." Jordan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze dropping to his hands. "I didn't do it for show, sir," he replied. "It's just something I've always done to keep my mind active." "I understand that," Maximus said, his voice now softer. "But what I'm hearing, Jordan, is that you have skills that go beyond just keeping your mind active. You're wasted here. Doing this job, it's not right. You're too valuable for this." Jordan's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Maximus paused. "I mean that I'm offering you something more than mopping floors and emptying trash cans. I want you to work for me. As a global relations specialist. Someone who can work with our international clients, someone who understands the value of communication beyond borders. Someone who can make real changes." Jordan's eyes widened. This was insane. He had never imagined anything like this happening to him. The CEO of a tech giant was offering him a chance at a career, an actual career, not just a job. "But I don't have a degree," Jordan protested. "I've never worked in a corporate environment." Maximus raised a hand to stop him. "You don't need one. I've seen what you can do. You've shown me everything I need to know. A degree won't teach you what you've learned on your own. And what you've learned is more valuable than any paper hanging on a wall." Jordan was stunned. He had never imagined that someone, especially someone in such a high position, would see him as anything more than a lowly janitor. The thought of stepping into the world of business, where his language skills could actually be appreciated, was both thrilling and terrifying. Maximus leaned forward, his gaze intent. "Think about it, Jordan. This is your chance. Your opportunity to make something of yourself. No more hiding behind a cleaning cart. What do you say?" The offer hung in the air, heavy with possibility. Jordan had a decision to make. But before he could respond, the door to the office burst open, and Olivia Carter, the company's head of human resources, stepped in. Her eyes narrowed as she took in the scene. Maximus's offer was already shifting the entire dynamic of the office, and Olivia was about to make it even more complicated. The tension in the room thickened. Jordan sat motionless, still processing Maximus's offer. He had never imagined his life could change so drastically in an instant. The words, "global relations specialist," echoed in his mind like a dream he wasn't sure he could reach. Before he could say a word, Olivia Carter stepped into the room, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. She was a tall woman, confident, with an air of authority that seemed to fill the room before she even spoke. "Maximus," she said, eyeing Jordan with an unreadable expression. "Can I have a word with you? Alone?" Maximus turned toward Olivia, his eyebrows raised in surprise. "Olivia, now isn't really the time." "I believe it is," Olivia interrupted, her tone icy but controlled. "This is highly irregular, Maximus. You're offering a janitor a position that requires years of experience and a university degree. This isn't just a kindness, this is a potential liability. We have protocols. We can't just overlook them. Maximus exhaled sharply but nodded. All right. Jordan, could you give us a moment? Jordan, still stunned, nodded and quietly left the office, closing the door behind him. His mind raced, but he tried to focus on what had just happened. A new opportunity. His chance to prove something. He couldn't let it slip away. Outside, the hallway felt colder now, as if the weight of the conversation still hung in the air. He leaned against the wall, trying to steady his breath. He didn't know how long he stood there, but it felt like hours. Inside the office, Olivia crossed her arms, her expression sharp as she locked eyes with Maximus. You can't be serious about this, she said, voice low but filled with authority. The board will never approve it. This is a risky move, and you're pushing it without any regard for the company's standards. We're a tech firm, Maximus. We deal with multi-million-dollar clients, not janitors. Maximus interrupted, his voice calm but firm. Olivia's eyes narrowed. Exactly. A janitor who has, what? Speaks some languages. That doesn't make him qualified to handle global clients, Maximus. It's a nice story, but there's no substance behind it. Maximus stood up, his chair scraping slightly against the floor as he moved to the window, looking out at the city below. I've been running this company for a long time, Olivia. I've seen the same resumes, the same backgrounds. A lot of them have the qualifications, sure. But very few have the heart, the drive, or the real-world intelligence to get the job done when it counts. Olivia watched him for a moment, silent. And you think this Jordan has all that? Maximus's eyes met hers, unwavering. Yes. I do. And he's the kind of person who doesn't get noticed, until someone looks closely enough to see him for what he really is. Olivia clenched her jaw, clearly unsettled, but she didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned her gaze back to the door, where Jordan had just stepped out. I think you're making a mistake, Olivia said softly, her voice tight with frustration. But if you're determined to do this, then I'll hold you to it. But you better be ready for the fallout when it comes. Maximus didn't flinch. I'm not afraid of a little fallout. This company needs change. This company needs someone like him. The following morning, Jordan was summoned back to Maximus's office. His stomach twisted with nerves, but he couldn't deny the excitement bubbling up inside him. Today, he would face his first real test. When he entered, Maximus didn't waste time with pleasantries. Jordan, we're going to put your skills to the test, he said, his tone direct. We've got a group of international clients coming in later this afternoon. I want you to handle the communications with them, answer questions, give the tours, smooth over any issues. If you can do this, you're in. But if you can't, we'll have to reconsider. Jordan's heart pounded. This was it. The moment he had to prove himself. No more hiding behind a mop or an old cleaning cart. Maximus watched him closely, his eyes steady. You'll be dealing with a high-level group from Japan and Germany. You'll need to use everything you know. Are you ready? Jordan swallowed hard, then nodded. Yes, sir. Hours later, Jordan found himself standing in the grand lobby of ByteGen Technologies, the sharp clack of his dress shoes echoing against the glass and steel walls. His nerves were on edge, but he was determined not to let it show. The Japanese and German clients were just arriving, each of them impeccably dressed, with the kind of sharp suits that Jordan knew could intimidate anyone without the right presence. But he had to do this. No more doubting himself. He greeted them with a smile and began leading them toward the meeting rooms. His first words were in Japanese, and the clients immediately relaxed, clearly impressed by his fluency. He smoothly transitioned to German as they asked questions about ByteGen services, offering translations and clarifications with ease. But then, one of the clients, Mr. Takeda, a senior executive from Japan, paused, his expression shifting. He asked something in a low voice that Jordan couldn't fully catch. Jordan took a deep breath. He had prepared for this. This wasn't just about languages, it was about understanding people. Culture. The subtle cues that made a difference in a successful business relationship. Jordan didn't hesitate. He answered, switching seamlessly between Japanese and German, reading the room, adjusting his tone to match the formality of the situation. The group nodded in approval, the tension easing in the air. Later that afternoon, after the clients had left, Maximus called Jordan back into his office. This time, there was no need for words. Maximus's expression was calm, but his eyes gleamed with approval. He leaned back in his chair, watching Jordan intently. "You did well, Jordan," he said, his voice softer than before. "I'm impressed. You handled yourself perfectly." Jordan's heart raced, but he didn't show it. This was his moment. He had made it. He was finally stepping into the world where his talents weren't ignored. But just as Jordan began to let the weight of the achievement settle, Maximus stood up, a serious look crossing his face. "But, Jordan, I need to know if you're truly committed. You've proven you have the skill. Now, we need to know if you're ready to step up to the responsibility." Jordan took a step forward. "I'm ready, sir." Maximus paused, staring at him for a long moment before nodding. "Then welcome to the team. But remember, we don't do things halfway. You'll be tested again. And again. Until you've earned your place. Understand?" Jordan nodded firmly, feeling the weight of Maximus's words sink in. This was just the beginning. Jordan had never felt more alive. After his successful handling of the international clients, Maximus Green's office felt different. The air was charged with possibility, and Jordan felt it deep in his bones. But just as quickly as the exhilaration came, the pressure began to build. The next day, Jordan was called into Maximus's office once again. This time, there were no pleasantries, no small talk. Maximus was sitting at his desk, the usual cool confidence in his demeanor replaced by something else, something sharper. "Jordan," Maximus began, his voice steady, but with a hint of urgency. "We've got another project coming up. A big one. I need someone who's not just skilled, but also ready for everything that comes with it." Jordan nodded, already bracing for whatever was next. He had been waiting for this moment, the moment when the real challenges would begin. Maximus paused, looking at Jordan with an intensity that made the room feel even smaller. "This isn't going to be like the last meeting. You're going to be front and center, working with our top executives. We're negotiating a major contract with a company from Brazil, and there's a language barrier that I need you to bridge." Jordan's mind raced. The last task had been daunting, but it had been manageable. This was different. The stakes were higher, the people he would be dealing with were more powerful. And they weren't just going to be impressed by his linguistic skills alone. "Do you think you're ready for this?" Maximus's gaze locked onto Jordan's. There was a moment of silence. The weight of the question hung in the air, and Jordan felt it pressing down on him. Was he ready? Of course, he was. He had worked so hard for this moment, but now that it was staring him in the face, the reality felt different. The uncertainty crept in. But then, he remembered why he was here. Why he had worked tirelessly to get this far. "Yes, I'm ready," Jordan said, his voice firm despite the nervous energy inside him. Maximus leaned back in his chair, nodding slowly. "Good. Then get prepared. This is your test. You show them you're more than just someone who cleans the floors. You show them you can run with the big dogs." Later that week, Jordan found himself standing outside a sleek, modern conference room, waiting for the Brazilian delegation to arrive. His palms were sweaty, his nerves a little shaky. This wasn't just a conversation about cleaning or small talk. This was about a multi-million-dollar contract. This was about making his mark. As the door swung open, Jordan's heart skipped a beat. The Brazilian team entered, led by Carlos Silva, a senior executive with a reputation for being tough, even ruthless, in negotiations. He was a man used to getting what he wanted, and today, Jordan was about to find out just how much was riding on this meeting. Maximus gestured for Jordan to step forward, his expression unreadable. "Carlos, this is Jordan Blackwood. He'll be assisting with the translation and making sure that communication goes smoothly today." Carlos's eyes scanned Jordan, but his expression didn't change. He didn't even offer a handshake. "I hope your skills are up to par, Mr. Blackwood," he said, his voice thick with a foreign accent. Jordan could feel the weight of the moment. This was no longer just about translation. This was about earning respect in a room full of powerful people. He nodded, his voice calm but firm. "I'm confident we'll have no issues." The meeting began, and the conversation quickly turned to the terms of the contract. As the discussions grew more complex, the room was filled with technical jargon and nuanced cultural references that could easily be lost in translation. But Jordan didn't hesitate. He moved between English, Portuguese, and Spanish, keeping up with the pace of the conversation and making sure nothing was missed. But it wasn't just the language that he needed to navigate. It was the subtle dynamics of the negotiation, reading body language, understanding tone, and knowing when to step in and when to stay quiet. Jordan had been practicing these skills for years, but today, they would be put to the ultimate test. The tension in the room was palpable. The Brazilians weren't budging, and the American executives were growing frustrated. Maximus shot Jordan a look, signaling him to step in. Jordan took a deep breath, then addressed Carlos directly in fluent Portuguese. "Mr. Silva, I understand your concerns. But if I may, there are some key points we haven't addressed fully that could make this deal more advantageous for both sides." His voice was steady, calm, and confident. For a brief moment, he felt the weight of the room shift. The tension eased, and the focus shifted back to him. Carlos raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed, but he didn't give an inch. The negotiation continued, but Jordan's ability to bridge the cultural and language gaps was undeniable. By the end of the meeting, a deal had been struck, one that both sides were happy with. As the meeting wrapped up and the delegation filed out of the room, Maximus approached Jordan with a look of quiet approval. The clients from Brazil shook his hand, their smiles genuine. They were impressed. And more importantly, they trusted him now. "Well done," Maximus said, his voice low. "You didn't just handle the language, you handled the room. That's what we needed." Jordan felt a surge of pride, but it was tempered by the realization that this was only the beginning. He had made it through one test, but there would be more. So much more. As he left the conference room, Jordan felt the weight of the last few days crashing down on him. The uncertainty, the pressure, and the constant battle to prove himself, it was all a part of the journey now. But as exhausting as it was, he felt a spark inside him. A spark that had been dormant for far too long. The weeks that followed were a blur. Jordan's reputation began to grow within ByteGen Technologies. He was no longer just the janitor, the invisible man in the background. People started to notice him. He was sitting in on more meetings, advising on cross-cultural communications, and even attending strategy sessions with Maximus and the top executives. But with success came scrutiny. Olivia Carter, who had remained skeptical from the beginning, was beginning to make her voice heard. The whispers in the hall started to grow louder. People started asking questions. How did Jordan Blackwood, a janitor, get to sit at the table with the company's top decision-makers? Olivia's discontent was obvious. She had never agreed with Maximus's decision to elevate Jordan, and now she was beginning to act on it. It wasn't just passive resistance anymore. Olivia had begun to question Jordan's qualifications openly, raising doubts with other senior leaders in the company. Jordan could feel the tension mounting. Every step he took toward success seemed to push him further into the crosshairs of those who believed he didn't belong. Olivia wasn't just against him, she was actively working to undermine his position. But Jordan wasn't backing down. He couldn't. The stakes were too high. Maximus had given him a chance, and now it was time to prove that he was more than just a fluke. The pressure had been mounting steadily, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Jordan's success had been undeniable, but with success came inevitable pushback. He had made it past the first hurdle, winning over the Brazilian delegation, but now, the real challenge had begun. At ByteGen Technologies, nothing ever seemed simple. The company had grown fast over the years, expanding its operations internationally, but with that expansion came growing pains. Old habits were hard to break, and the company's leadership team was no exception. Jordan's rise through the ranks had turned heads, but not all the heads had turned in approval. Olivia Carter, the head of human resources, was the most vocal critic of Jordan's newfound position. Since that fateful meeting where Maximus had given Jordan his first big opportunity, Olivia had made it clear that she didn't think Jordan belonged at the table with the executives. She believed Maximus's decision was more about optics, about appearing progressive, than about merit. And she was determined to make sure that no one forgot it. Jordan could feel it, too. Every time he entered a meeting, there was a shift in the air, a subtle but palpable tension. The whispers in the halls had begun, and Jordan couldn't ignore them. Some people were curious about his background and how he had managed to climb the corporate ladder so quickly, while others seemed to resent the attention he was receiving. "Do you think he really deserves this?" he overheard one of the marketing assistants say, her voice dripping with skepticism. "I mean, he's just a janitor, right? I'm still waiting for my promotion." Jordan did his best to ignore the comments, but they stung. He knew he had worked harder than anyone realized to get where he was. Every spare moment had been spent studying languages, improving his skills, and refining his ability to navigate complex cultural landscapes. But no matter how much he accomplished, there were those who would never see him as anything more than the man who had once cleaned their offices. Maximus had been supportive, but Jordan could sense the growing tension between him and Olivia. One morning, after a particularly difficult board meeting, Maximus called Jordan into his office. "Jordan, I need to talk to you," Maximus said, his voice calm but with a hint of urgency. "I've been hearing some murmurs around the office. There are concerns about your role here, especially from Olivia." Jordan frowned but nodded. He had expected this. Olivia had made no secret of her objections, and now it seemed like the rest of the leadership team was starting to take notice. "Is she really that much of a problem?" Jordan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Maximus leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. "She's not the only one. There are others who feel that you don't have the qualifications they expect from someone in your position. Some think you've been given a chance, but you're not ready for the responsibilities that come with it." Jordan's heart sank. He had known this moment would come, but hearing it from Maximus made it real. "I've worked hard to get here," Jordan said, his voice firm despite the knot in his stomach. "I'm ready. I'm not backing down." Maximus looked at him, his eyes studying him closely. "I know you are. But you need to understand something. People don't always appreciate when someone comes from outside the expected mold. They don't always see the value in someone who's not playing the game the way they're used to." Jordan nodded slowly, absorbing the gravity of the situation. He had to prove that his success wasn't a fluke, that he could handle the pressure and the politics that came with the position. The following week, ByteGen's biggest project yet was on the horizon. A major partnership with a tech giant from Germany was about to be finalized, and Jordan was tasked with handling the cultural negotiations. This wasn't just about translating words. It was about navigating a complex relationship between two high-stakes companies and ensuring that communication remained smooth, effective, and professional. Maximus assigned Jordan a key role in leading the discussions. "I'm putting you front and center for this one," he said. "You'll be responsible for making sure that the deal goes through smoothly, and I trust you to handle any issues that come up." The pressure was suffocating. Jordan had never faced anything like this before. But he also knew that this was his chance. If he succeeded, it would solidify his place at the table, no questions asked. The day of the meeting arrived. The German delegation was in the building, and Jordan was tasked with greeting them and leading the opening discussions. As he made his way to the conference room, he felt the eyes of the office on him. The whispers were louder now. Would he succeed? Or would he fall flat, proving the naysayers right? The German team was punctual, as expected, and their leader, Dr. Klaus Richter, was as no-nonsense as Maximus had warned. He was a man who valued precision, efficiency, and above all, competence. Jordan knew that if he faltered even once, this deal could slip through their fingers. He greeted the German team in fluent German, and immediately, there was a shift in the room. The ice was broken, and the delegation seemed to relax, their hard faces softening just a little. But Jordan knew that speaking the language wasn't enough. He had to understand their mindset, their culture, their values. As the meeting progressed, the stakes grew higher. The conversation turned toward the specifics of the partnership, and the German team began to push for terms that Maximus wasn't comfortable with. Dr. Richter's tone was firm, and the atmosphere in the room grew tense. Maximus shot Jordan a look, signaling him to step in. Jordan didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, taking charge of the room. "Dr. Richter, I understand your concerns, and I can assure you that ByteGen is committed to making this partnership work. But there are certain points we need to clarify to ensure that both sides walk away feeling valued." He spoke calmly but confidently, addressing each of Dr. Richter's points with precision. He wasn't just translating, he was negotiating. He was reading the room, adjusting his tone to maintain the balance between firmness and diplomacy. He could feel the tension shifting in his favor. By the time the meeting ended, a deal had been reached. The terms were slightly modified, but both sides were satisfied. As the German delegation left the room, Maximus stood and clapped Jordan on the back. "You did it," Maximus said with a smile. "You proved everyone wrong. Even Olivia." Jordan felt a rush of relief and pride wash over him. He had done it. He had taken on the responsibility, handled the pressure, and come out on top. But even with the success of the negotiation, Jordan knew that this wasn't the end. Olivia's resistance wasn't over. She had already begun to rally others within the company who were skeptical of his rise, planting seeds of doubt wherever she could. Later that week, Olivia cornered Jordan in the break room, her expression hard. "You think this is just going to be handed to you, don't you?" she said, her voice low. Jordan met her gaze steadily. "No, I'm not expecting anything to be handed to me. But I've proven myself. I'm here because I earned it." Olivia smirked. "We'll see how long that lasts." As she walked away, Jordan couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was far from over. He had proven he could handle the pressure, but there were more challenges ahead, challenges that wouldn't just test his skills, but his ability to navigate the politics of the corporate world. Jordan had barely settled into his new role when he realized the true weight of the journey ahead. The deal with the German tech giant had gone well, and Maximus had been pleased. But what Jordan couldn't shake was the quiet resistance building within the walls of ByteGen. People were starting to notice his rise, and not everyone was on board. The weeks that followed were filled with small victories and subtle setbacks. Jordan found himself taking on more responsibility, leading discussions, sitting in on high-level meetings, and navigating increasingly complex projects. But for every new success, there was someone new who questioned his position. Olivia Carter, still a vocal critic, had escalated her efforts. Her latest tactic was more indirect, undermining his authority in meetings, questioning his qualifications in private, and making sly comments to other executives. The whispers about Jordan's rapid rise were getting louder, and some of the employees who had initially been curious about him now seemed doubtful. Jordan knew that Olivia was smart, calculating. She didn't make her moves obvious, Instead, she used the support of a few senior leaders to slowly chip away at his credibility. She even went so far as to plant doubt in Maximus's mind, questioning whether Jordan's ability to smooth-talk clients was enough to make up for his lack of formal business experience. But Jordan wasn't going to back down. He had been underestimated his entire life, and he wasn't about to let a few whispers take him down now. The tipping point came when Jordan was asked to lead a critical presentation to ByteGen's largest investor, David Reinhardt, a shrewd and powerful figure in the tech world. This was the moment Jordan had been preparing for, his chance to prove that he wasn't just some lucky janitor who happened to speak a few languages. The stakes were higher than ever, and the pressure was suffocating. David Reinhardt had been skeptical about ByteGen's growth strategy from the beginning. If Jordan could win him over, it would be a major victory for the company, and for Jordan personally. But if he failed, it could spell disaster, not only for the company's future but for his own career. Maximus had placed his full trust in Jordan, and now it was time to deliver. As the day of the presentation arrived, Jordan felt his nerves tighten. He knew this wasn't just about the slides or the numbers, it was about how he presented himself, how he connected with Reinhardt. He couldn't afford to miss a single opportunity. The conference room was packed with ByteGen's top executives, all eager to see how Jordan would handle this crucial moment. Reinhardt entered the room, his sharp eyes scanning the group before settling on Jordan. Jordan stood up, his posture straight and confident. He had prepared for weeks, memorizing figures, rehearsing his pitch, anticipating every possible question. But when he began speaking, he felt the weight of the room on his shoulders. Every word, every gesture mattered. He couldn't afford to falter. The presentation started smoothly, and Jordan felt a sense of control. He outlined ByteGen's vision for expansion, highlighting the company's growth in international markets, and his role in building relationships with global clients. As he spoke, Jordan could see Reinhardt listening intently, his face unreadable. That was a good sign, right? But then, Reinhardt interrupted. "Let me stop you right there," he said, his voice sharp. "This all sounds great, but where's the real strategy? Where's the evidence that your team," he gestured toward the other executives, "has the experience to execute this plan?" The room went silent. Jordan could feel all eyes on him. He knew this was the moment. The moment to either sink or swim. "With all due respect, Mr. Reinhardt," Jordan replied, his voice steady, "it's not about just experience. It's about vision, adaptability, and the willingness to go beyond the traditional strategies. ByteGen is evolving, and we need to evolve with it." Jordan continued, adjusting his tone, using his knowledge of the company's culture and the market dynamics to address Reinhardt's concerns. It was more than just about numbers. It was about showing them that ByteGen was a force to be reckoned with, even in the ever-changing global landscape. As the presentation ended, Jordan's heart was pounding in his chest. The room had gone quiet again, and Jordan was waiting for the verdict. Would Reinhardt see his vision? Or had he just ruined everything? To Jordan's surprise, Reinhardt smiled. "Well said, Mr. Blackwood," he said, his voice calm. "You've given me something to think about. I appreciate your perspective." Maximus gave Jordan a small nod from across the room, a silent approval. It wasn't a perfect victory, but it was enough. Reinhardt had been won over, and the deal was back on track. But as the meeting wrapped up and the executives filed out, Jordan couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The tension in the room hadn't fully dissipated. Olivia's eyes met his as she passed by, her gaze cold and calculating. He knew the game wasn't over. The next day, Jordan received an unexpected call. It was from Olivia Carter, and she was asking to meet with him. Jordan hesitated, unsure of what to expect. He had long suspected that Olivia would make her move, but he hadn't anticipated it happening so soon. When they met in her office, Olivia wasted no time with pleasantries. "I've been hearing a lot of praise for you lately, Jordan," she said, her voice smooth but edged with something darker. "You've impressed Maximus, haven't you?" But let me make one thing clear, you're still just a janitor to me. Nothing more. Jordan stood there, taken aback by her bluntness. But he didn't let her see how much her words affected him. Instead, he remained calm and steady. I'm not a janitor anymore, Olivia, he said quietly. And I don't need your approval to know that. Olivia leaned forward in her chair, her eyes narrowing. You think you've earned your spot here? That you belong at the table with the real players? She chuckled darkly. You're an experiment, Jordan. A charity case, at best. Jordan's anger flared for a moment, but he didn't let it show. If you think I'm a charity case, then I'll prove you wrong. I'm here because I earned it. And no matter what you do, I'm not going anywhere. Olivia's expression faltered for a moment, before she straightened up. We'll see about that. Don't get too comfortable, Jordan. This is far from over. As Jordan left Olivia's office, a sense of unease settled in his gut. He had known Olivia would try to bring him down, but the venom in her words was more than just resistance, it was personal. And now, he was beginning to realize just how much power she held behind the scenes. Maximus had been a strong ally, but he couldn't shield Jordan from the corporate politics that were now in full swing. Olivia had her supporters, and she was not afraid to use them against him. Jordan knew the battle for his future at ByteGen was just beginning. But he also knew one thing for certain, he wasn't going to let anyone, not Olivia or anyone else, push him back to the shadows. The morning after his tense conversation with Olivia, Jordan couldn't shake the weight of her words. It wasn't just about the career advancements or corporate politics, it was about proving to himself, to Maximus, and to everyone else in the company that his rise was no accident. But Olivia's words had planted a seed of doubt. Could he keep fighting this battle? Or would the forces working against him finally take him down? Maximus had continued to support Jordan, but even the CEO couldn't shield him from the whispers in the hallways. Olivia wasn't the only one who had doubts. The higher Jordan climbed, the more people were looking for reasons to knock him down. The undercurrent of skepticism in the company was palpable. It had been 3 weeks since the presentation with the German delegation, and Jordan had been in back-to-back meetings, executive updates, client briefings, and strategy sessions. He had been living in a constant state of alertness. But despite all the work he'd put in, he could sense that things weren't as they seemed. The next big project had arrived. ByteGen was set to launch a new division aimed at expanding the company's reach into South America. Jordan was tasked with spearheading the international communications for the launch. It was a huge responsibility, and everyone knew it. This could be his moment to solidify his place, or it could be his breaking point. Maximus had placed a lot of trust in him, but would that trust survive the growing resistance from the leadership team? The planning meetings for the South American launch were intense. Jordan had prepared diligently, knowing that this was more than just a communications effort, it was a chance to prove his worth on the global stage. Maximus was counting on him, and that pressure weighed heavily on his shoulders. During one of the meetings, as Jordan presented the strategy for handling the regional partners, Olivia couldn't help herself. As the discussion turned to the timeline and delegation of responsibilities, she interrupted. Jordan, Olivia began, her voice smooth but biting, I'm not sure I understand why you're handling all this. You don't have the kind of background to manage such a large-scale international operation. This isn't about speaking a few languages or making connections, it's about solid business experience and operational knowledge. The room went silent for a moment. Jordan felt every eye on him, the weight of her challenge hanging in the air. For a split second, he was paralyzed by the question. Was she right? Did he belong here, or was he just fooling everyone, including himself? But then Jordan remembered why he was here. He wasn't about to let someone like Olivia tear him down, not now. Not after everything he had fought for. I disagree, Olivia, Jordan said, his voice steady. This project is about more than just logistics and experience. It's about understanding cultural nuances, building real relationships, and creating a genuine connection with our partners. That's what I bring to the table. I understand these markets in a way that's not just textbook knowledge. Olivia shot him a look of disdain but said nothing more. Maximus, however, seemed pleased with the response, giving Jordan a brief nod of approval. Despite his win in the meeting, Jordan couldn't shake the feeling that he was swimming against a tide that was growing stronger. Olivia's attacks were becoming more frequent, and she was starting to gain traction among the other senior leaders who had been skeptical from the start. One afternoon, after a long strategy session, Jordan received a message from Maximus to meet him in his office. When he arrived, Maximus greeted him with a serious expression. "Jordan," Maximus began, his voice low. "I'm hearing a lot of chatter. Olivia isn't the only one raising concerns. Some of the others in the company are questioning whether you're the right fit for the direction we're heading. They don't think you're qualified to lead the South American launch." Jordan's stomach dropped. He had expected Olivia's resistance, but hearing that others were questioning him, too, hit harder than he anticipated. "Is that what you think?" Jordan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Maximus sighed, his gaze flickering with frustration. "No, Jordan. I've seen your work, and I know what you're capable of. But I can't ignore the noise. The board is putting pressure on me to make sure we have someone who's fully equipped for a project of this scale. They don't see your value the way I do." Jordan felt a pang of anger. The pressure was mounting, and he wasn't sure how much more he could take. Maximus was on his side, but corporate politics were more complicated than just having one powerful ally. "I've worked harder than anyone here," Jordan said, his voice rising with frustration. "I'm not here because of Maximus's favor. I'm here because I earned it. I don't need anyone's approval to know that I belong." Maximus leaned back in his chair, clearly considering his words. "I know you do. But you need to understand that there's more at play here than just your ability. This isn't just about your performance, it's about perception, office politics, and how people view your role. You have to prove to them that you're not just capable but essential." The next few days were a blur of meetings, pressure, and growing tension. Jordan could feel the walls closing in around him. Olivia was making her move, quietly, subtly, but it was becoming impossible to ignore. The turning point came when Jordan was called into another meeting, this time with the board of directors. Maximus wasn't there. The room was full of skeptical faces, and Jordan knew this wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. Olivia was already sitting at the head of the table, her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. The moment he entered, the room fell silent. All eyes were on him. "Mr. Blackwood," one of the board members began, "we appreciate your work on the recent projects. But we have serious concerns about your ability to lead the South American initiative. We don't think you have the required experience to take this on." Jordan's chest tightened. This was it. This was the moment he had been dreading. They had all been waiting for him to fail, waiting for the opportunity to pull him down. "I've been with ByteGen for a year now," Jordan replied, his voice calm, despite the racing of his heart. "And in that time, I've proven my worth. I understand the cultural dynamics of South America better than anyone in this room, and I've built relationships with our partners there that no one else has. I've earned my place at this table, and I'm not going to let anyone take that away from me." There was a long pause before another board member spoke up. "We're not questioning your ability to connect with people, Jordan. We're questioning your ability to manage something of this magnitude. You're a valuable asset, but perhaps you need to stay in a role that suits your skill set. Maybe something more aligned with the initial position you held." Jordan felt a wave of frustration wash over him. This wasn't about his skills. This was about something deeper, about his place in the company and the system that kept him on the outside, no matter how hard he tried to prove his worth. But he wasn't going to back down. "Not now. I am more than capable of handling this project," he said, his voice steady. "And if you don't see that, then maybe it's time for me to move on." Maximus entered the room just then, his eyes locking onto Jordan's. He could see the tension in the air, the weight of the moment pressing down on both of them. "That's enough," Maximus said, his voice cutting through the silence. "Jordan stays. He's leading the South American launch, and I'm backing him. If anyone here has a problem with that, we can talk about it after the meeting." For a long moment, the room remained silent. And then, slowly, the board members nodded, some begrudgingly, others with resigned acceptance. After Maximus's intervention at the board meeting, Jordan felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. He had fought back, and for now, the battle was won. But the war was far from over. Olivia and her allies had only been momentarily subdued, and Jordan knew it wouldn't be long before they regrouped. For the next few weeks, Jordan focused on his work with unwavering determination. The South American launch was coming up quickly, and he couldn't afford distractions. With Maximus backing him, he threw himself into preparing the strategy and coordinating the international team. He knew that this project had the potential to either cement his place in ByteGen or shatter the fragile trust Maximus had placed in him. But the whispers didn't stop. Every conversation felt like an interrogation. Every meeting felt like a test. Olivia's icy demeanor was hard to ignore, and even some of his colleagues, people who had once been neutral, now looked at him with suspicion. No matter how much he succeeded, there was always someone waiting to knock him down a peg. In one particularly tense meeting, Sarah Evans, the vice president of operations, expressed concerns about the timeline Jordan had proposed for the South American launch. "We can't afford delays, Jordan. This market is volatile, and we need someone who has more experience managing this kind of complexity." Jordan kept his composure, but inside, the words stung. He had faced this kind of doubt before, but it never got easier. Maximus interjected, "Sarah, Jordan has been on top of this from day one. He's more than capable of handling it. Trust him." Despite Maximus's words of support, the tension in the room remained palpable. There was still a lingering doubt about Jordan's abilities, an unspoken belief that, despite his successes, he didn't belong in the position he held. A week later, the first real crisis of the South American launch hit. One of the key regional partners, Grupo Nova, a massive technology firm in Brazil, unexpectedly withdrew from the deal, citing concerns about ByteGen's commitment to local partnerships. The news hit hard. ByteGen had been counting on this partnership to open up the South American market, and now it was slipping through their fingers. Maximus called an emergency meeting, and the weight of the situation settled heavily on Jordan's shoulders. He knew this was a make-or-break moment. This wasn't just about fixing a deal, this was about proving he could navigate a crisis on a global scale. As the team gathered around the conference table, Maximus addressed the group. "This is a critical moment for ByteGen. Losing Grupo Nova means we'll need to rethink our approach to this launch. Jordan, I'm putting you in charge of negotiating with them directly. We need you to get them back on board, no matter what it takes." Jordan's heart pounded in his chest. The pressure was unbearable. He had already been under the microscope for his role in the launch, and now, with a major partner pulling out, all eyes would be on him. "I'll get it done," Jordan said, his voice steady, though his mind was racing with the weight of the challenge. Maximus nodded. "I know you can, Jordan. But remember, the clock is ticking. We can't afford to let this slide." The next day, Jordan found himself on a flight to Brazil, preparing for what would likely be the toughest negotiation of his career. He had always been able to connect with international partners, but this situation was different. Grupo Nova wasn't just any partner, they were one of the largest players in South America, and they held all the leverage. Upon arrival in São Paulo, Jordan was met by a representative from Grupo Nova, Ricardo Alves, a seasoned negotiator with a reputation for being tough but fair. The tension in the air was palpable as Jordan and Ricardo shook hands. "You're here to salvage what's left of this deal," Ricardo said bluntly. "I'm not sure there's much left to save, but I'm willing to listen." Jordan knew this wasn't just about smoothing over a few bumps, this was a battle for ByteGen's future in South America. If he failed, everything he had worked for could crumble. "Ricardo, I understand your concerns, Jordan began, trying to keep his tone measured despite the pressure mounting in his chest. But Bite-Gen is committed to building long-term partnerships in this region. We've made mistakes, and we're ready to make it right. But we need Grupo Nova's expertise to move forward. Ricardo studied him for a long moment. You know, Jordan, we're not just talking about business here. We're talking about trust. And right now, Bite-Gen has lost mine. Jordan paused, searching for the right words. This wasn't just about closing a deal, it was about rebuilding a relationship from the ground up. I get it, he said finally. We've made mistakes. But this isn't just a transaction for us. It's an opportunity to build something real, something that will last. We're here to stay, and we want you with us. I'll do whatever it takes to show you that. There was a long silence as Ricardo considered his words. Finally, he spoke. You've got one shot, Jordan. One shot to prove to me that Bite-Gen is serious. If you fail, this is over. The following days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and tense discussions. Jordan had kept Maximus in the loop, but he hadn't let anyone else at Bite-Gen know just how critical the situation was. If he succeeded, the deal could be saved. If he failed, it would all come crashing down. After several tense days, Jordan received the call he'd been waiting for. Grupo Nova had agreed to re-enter negotiations, but only on their terms. There was still work to be done, but the door wasn't closed. Jordan returned to Bite-Gen a hero, though he knew the battle was far from over. The team celebrated his success, but the tension between him and Olivia remained. As the company prepared for the South American launch, Jordan realized that this crisis was just one of many tests he would face. His rise at Bite-Gen had been fast, but it hadn't been easy, and it wasn't going to get any easier. Maximus called Jordan into his office the next morning. There was a new energy in the room, a sense of progress that hadn't been there before. You did it, Jordan, Maximus said, his tone warm but filled with pride. You saved the deal. You kept your cool, and you delivered. That's what this company needs, someone who can handle the heat, no matter how high it gets. Jordan allowed himself a moment to bask in the praise, but the reality of the situation wasn't lost on him. The fight wasn't over. Olivia was still out there, and the rest of the board wasn't fully convinced. Every success was just another opportunity for someone to tear him down. But for now, he had won this round. Thank you, Maximus, Jordan said, his voice steady. I'll keep proving myself. I'm not done yet. Maximus smiled. That's what I want to hear. Jordan had fought hard to get to where he was, but the more successful he became, the more intense the scrutiny grew. His deal with Grupo Nova had been a turning point, but he knew that in the world of corporate power struggles, there would always be another challenge waiting around the corner. The South American launch was officially underway, and Jordan's team was executing the strategy flawlessly. Bite-Gen's presence in the region was steadily growing, and the company was on the verge of something monumental. For the first time in months, Jordan allowed himself to feel a sense of accomplishment. But that calm wouldn't last. Olivia Carter, who had been waiting for the right moment to strike, finally saw her opportunity. Her plan wasn't to take Jordan down in one swift move, she wasn't that obvious. Instead, she had slowly, methodically, begun to sow doubts about his long-term viability at Bite-Gen. She had begun planting seeds of concern among other executives, undermining Jordan's authority wherever she could. One morning, Jordan walked into his office to find a message from Maximus requesting an urgent meeting. As he walked toward the conference room, he felt the familiar weight of impending conflict. Maximus had been supportive, but even he couldn't shield Jordan from the political games that were being played behind the scenes. Jordan had become a target, and the higher he climbed, the more enemies he made. When he entered the conference room, Maximus was already there, sitting behind his desk with an unreadable expression. Jordan, Maximus began, his voice calm but serious. We need to talk. Jordan sat down, his heart pounding. What's going on? Maximus exhaled slowly. There's been some feedback. Olivia has been circulating concerns about your ability to lead the international teams long-term. She's raising doubts about whether you have the depth of experience necessary to manage our global expansion. Jordan's stomach twisted. He had been waiting for this moment, but it still stung. Olivia had been quietly working behind the scenes, and now she had started targeting his credibility with subtle attacks. Is this something you agree with? Jordan asked, his voice steady, though he could feel the pressure building inside him. Maximus looked at him for a moment before shaking his head. No. I don't agree. But you need to understand, Jordan, Olivia has influence in this company, and she's playing her cards carefully. The board's patience is wearing thin. They want results, and they want them fast. Jordan nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of Maximus's words. He knew the stakes had gotten even higher. This wasn't just about proving his worth anymore. This was about survival. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, strategy sessions, and growing tension. Jordan's role in ByteGen's expansion was becoming increasingly critical. The company was branching out into multiple international markets, and Jordan was responsible for overseeing communication and strategy in these regions. He knew that every move he made would be scrutinized. As the weeks passed, the pressure began to mount. Olivia's whispers were growing louder, and more members of the board were beginning to question Jordan's ability to manage such a high-profile initiative. The more successful the company became, the more he felt like a target. Every failure, no matter how small, felt amplified. Then came the moment that would change everything. ByteGen's biggest competitor, TechFusion, made a surprise move by launching a similar product in the same markets ByteGen had been targeting. The launch was aggressive, and it caught ByteGen off guard. Suddenly, Jordan's carefully crafted strategy for South America was in jeopardy. TechFusion's rapid expansion threatened to steal ByteGen's momentum, and all eyes turned to Jordan. Maximus called an emergency meeting with the senior leadership team, and the tension in the room was palpable. The room was full of faces Jordan had worked with for months, but now they were all looking at him with the kind of scrutiny that made him feel like a deer in headlights. This isn't just a minor setback, Maximus began, his voice firm. TechFusion is coming at us hard. We need to move quickly. Jordan, I'm relying on you to lead the counter-strategy. We have to regain control of the narrative in South America and the rest of our international markets. Jordan felt the weight of the moment. This was it. This was the test he had been preparing for. If he failed now, everything he had worked for, the trust Maximus had placed in him, the confidence he had earned, would be undone in an instant. He stood up, feeling the eyes of everyone in the room on him. We'll turn this around. We know the market, we have the connections, and we have the commitment. I'll lead the charge to reclaim our position. It won't be easy, but I'm not backing down. Maximus nodded, his gaze unwavering. Good. But remember, Jordan, this is your moment. Don't let it slip away. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of action. Jordan and his team worked around the clock, crafting a new strategy to counter TechFusion's aggressive push. They increased outreach to ByteGen's partners, revamped their marketing campaign, and targeted key regions that TechFusion had overlooked. But despite their best efforts, TechFusion wasn't backing down. Every time ByteGen made a move, TechFusion countered with something bigger, something bolder. The battle for dominance in the South American markets became a high-stakes game, and Jordan was feeling the pressure like never before. It was during one of these tense meetings that Olivia made her move. She had positioned herself as a voice of reason in the face of this crisis, presenting alternative strategies to Maximus and questioning Jordan's approach. She made it clear that if ByteGen's leadership continued to follow Jordan's plan, the company would risk losing even more ground. Maximus, who had been a staunch ally, now seemed uncertain. His gaze shifted between Jordan and Olivia, and for the first time, Jordan felt like he was losing control of the situation. Jordan knew that he had one last chance to prove himself. He couldn't let Olivia's influence be the deciding factor. This was his moment to show not only Maximus but the entire leadership team that he had the vision and the grit to turn the situation around. He called for a final meeting with the board, a last-ditch effort to present a new, revised strategy. It was bold. It was risky. But it was his best shot. Maximus stood beside him during the presentation, offering his unwavering support. "I'm putting my full trust in Jordan. This is the path forward, and it's the only one that will get us ahead of tech fusion." The room was tense as Jordan laid out the plan. He spoke with confidence, using the knowledge he had gained over the past months to address every concern and provide clear, actionable steps. He spoke not just as a leader, but as someone who understood the stakes on a personal level. The room seemed to hold its breath as he finished. There was a long silence before the board spoke. Then, slowly, the members began nodding in agreement. Olivia, too, remained silent. The plan was accepted. When the meeting adjourned, Jordan could finally breathe. He had done it. ByteGen's future in South America was secure. He had proven himself once again, not just to Maximus, but to the entire board. But even as he walked out of the conference room, the victory felt hollow. Olivia was still there, still watching, still waiting for her next move. But Jordan knew something now that he hadn't fully understood before: success, at least in this world, came at a cost. It meant constantly fighting, not just for promotions, but for respect, for recognition, and sometimes, even for survival. Maximus caught up to him outside the conference room. "You did it, Jordan," he said, his tone proud. "You've earned your place here. No one can deny that now." Jordan nodded, but the weight of Olivia's continued opposition loomed in his mind. He had won, yes. But this fight was far from over.